Howdy, howdy, and welcome to the Outside In Podcast, your source for the latest happenings in integrated facilities management and litigation support. Today, we're talking about the evolution of managed review from an on site service to a remote service with IST's managed review leaders Nicole Fryson, the National Director of Managed Review, and Denika Thomas, the National Director of Managed Review Recruiting. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Good afternoon, Nicole and Denika. Welcome to the Outside In Podcast. Can you tell us real quick where you're joining us from today?
Sure, I can start. I am joining you here from lovely Atlanta, Georgia. Sweltering heat, but yes, I'm joining you from Atlanta, Georgia.
Excellent.
And same here, Brad. I'm in Atlanta. It's sweltering hot outside, but trying to stay cool.
Thank goodness for AC, right?
Yes.
Go up to the Northeast where they don't know what AC is. I don't know how they deal with heat like this. Excellent. So today we're talking about how IST Managed Review has embraced the remote work environments to optimize the document review. But before we dive into that, I'm hoping each of you can just give us a little background in your history in litigation support and managed review.
Sure, I have been doing managed review for over 10 years now. I've worked at law firms and other vendors. I've worked offshore, spent 2 years in New Delhi, India, learning how they do managed review. So I've worked remotely, worked in the office in various capacities, but I have over 10 years of experience with managed review.
And how about you, Denika?
Started in the managed review world in 2013, so close to 9 years I've been in this space working with companies as well as law firms and really working with law schools to get the message out about managed review and what it entails for up and coming attorneys in the industry.
Excellent. So obviously, with all change, there are pros and cons. And in the last few years, we've seen an enormous amount of change in the managed review sector. Nicole, from the day-to-day operations side of the business, what are some of the biggest pros of a remote managed review environment?
I'd say the biggest one for me is just the spin up time, whether it's from the start of the review or if there's additional work. What we would see a lot of times before is if you needed somebody to come in over the weekend, with the commute time, them having to get dressed and leave their home to come to the office, it was a little bit like pulling teeth to get people to do overtime and to do weekend work. Now with it being remote, it's very easy. They can roll out of bed in their pajamas and hop on the computer, and they're more willing to give us those extra hours if we're in crunch time and need something additional to do. It's also easier to get people started on the review just because they're at home, they're working on their computers, which they're more familiar with. And so from that standpoint, that's one of the biggest pros that I've seen moving from in office to working remotely.
Yeah, I would have never thought about that, but that bring your own device technology or side of it really has to help with people's familiarity with the
Yeah,
systems.
yeah, it helps a
Excellent.
lot.
Danica, how has the move to remote management review positively benefited the review attorneys and in turn their clients when you're recruiting them?
Well, for me as a recruiter, it's definitely allowed me a wide pool of reviewers across the country, right? Before the remote world, we were very, very focused on specific geographic areas due to the relationship of where the office was and for our clients. But now that we're in the remote world, I'm able to recruit attorneys across the country, which allows me to have a bigger pool to determine whether or not the experience or the level of expertise that the client is looking for is there to give the client what they need. Also, for the reviewers, it allows a lot of flexibility for them working remotely. They're not having to commute. Also, clients have been very flexible in terms of time zone differences and accommodating people that are on the West Coast as opposed to people that are in the Eastern time zone or in the Midwest. So it's been very, very seamless. It's been very, very beneficial to clients because if someone's looking for a particular experience or expertise, it allows me as a recruiter to open up and cast a wide net when I'm looking for specific talent.
Excellent. So one of the things you talked about there was finding the right talent for the project. How do y'all go about from the start of a project, learning what that client wants and needs so that you can then find those right people?
We normally have a conversation with the client before the case ever kicks off. In fact, usually it's before they even get a statement of work from us so that we know and understand exactly what their needs are. So we ask them questions such as, the background of the case, what the subject matter of the case is. We're interested in knowing where reviewers need to be licensed. We ask about their conflicts process, those kinds of things. Even we'll ask about the number of hours that the reviewers will work because all of these factor into finding the right person. So once I have that information, I've gleaned that information from the client, I'll then talk to Denika, and then I'll let Denika take from here and how she takes that information and parlays it into putting together the review team.
So for me, once I get that information from Nicole, I'm constantly watching the market in terms of seeing what projects are currently have been posted on different platforms such as Populist or Indeed to see exactly, are particular companies looking for the same type of talent? Will my search be more difficult because, there are 5 Korean projects that are posted and I know that there's a limited pool of Korean fluent attorneys. So I take all of the market factors, what I'm seeing in terms of pay rate, durations for different projects, as well as the expertise they're looking for to determine, the likelihood of how fast I can turn around a team or find a team. For me as a recruiter, and I could say probably for Nicole as a PM, we prefer to work with people we worked with before. We know, the level of dedication. We know their work product. We know exactly, how they like to operate, and we know their preferences. So yes, once I get the information, I'm looking at all the factors. I'm looking at projects that we currently have, when they're wrapping, what the capacity of that team is and how that could parlay into a new team, or people on the current team that could go to the new project. I'm looking at a whole bunch of things, as well as other things, the other projects that are in the pipeline and when they're starting as well.
So I'm just curious. So obviously a larger pool is great, but it has to also cause some difficultiness in finding that. I know Nicole talked about what states are they licensed in. So now I assumed in the past, if you had a job in Atlanta and you were looking in the Atlanta pool, you knew the people were licensed for that job. So what are some of those challenges that have come about from the larger pool? Because it can't all be pros, I would assume.
Well, I'll say, the advantage of being on site was that we had the ability to interact with the reviewers, in person daily. That also presented challenges, but it allowed us to get to know the reviewer. It allowed us to find out more about them, about their personal lives, their kids, when they were going on vacation, all of those things. And so I would definitely say the communication style has changed now that we've gone remotely, and it is difficult to determine, the level of work product or talent a particular reviewer has to offer in the remote world. That's why, like I mentioned earlier, we do prefer the people that we worked with before. But at the same time, it does allow us, when we have larger projects or when we have a quick turnaround, to find people quickly now that we're able to, source candidates from across the country. So it has its pros and cons. I would say the drawback has been getting to know reviewers, getting to build that camaraderie, getting to offer, and have lunch and breakfasts and different, events with the reviewers. We've tried to accommodate that by doing newsletters as well as sending out gift cards and cookie cakes. But at the same time, you have to become creative in creating and getting to know reviewers, definitely now in this market.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's spend a little bit more time on that communication because obviously that's got to be one of the biggest changes here. So, in that operations world, what are some of the tools and platforms you're using on a day-to-day basis to communicate with these people to make it feel more seamless and more like an office environment?
I spend a lot more time via email, just emailing the entire group to give them updates. Whereas you'd walk into a room and give an update to the entire group in the same room, Now you've got to do email. So we've got distribution lists on email. On occasion, we'll use instant messenger, Slack or something like that to be able to communicate in real time. That doesn't happen often. From time to time, it does. I actually spend a lot more time on the phone with reviewers, believe it or not. So they'll pick up the phone and call me, or they'll call one of our team leads to ask a question. So it's been email, phone, and instant message to communicate with everybody. And I try very hard to keep people abreast of what's happening because that's really important in what we do because it's just so contractual. Things start and stop on a dime. And so you've got to keep them abreast of what's happening to keep them engaged. And the more communicative you are with the reviewers, the more likely they are to be loyal. Because I've even worked on projects. I was a contractor before, where you just hear nothing. It's a black hole, and that was even on site. And so that's not ideal. So we try very hard to make sure that we're communicating with them via email, phone, Slack, instant message, however we can to make sure they have all the information and they've got the answers. One of the other things we also use for them to communicate with counsel is relativity. So they're able to ask their questions within the platform, and then everybody has the benefit of seeing the question and the answer in real time. So it's not, a game of telephone where you say, hey, I heard that this is how it's supposed to operate, or this is how we're supposed to code the document. We make sure everybody gets the same answers and can see the document, and it's unfiltered, it's coming straight from counsel within the platform.
Yeah, one of the things I like that you said there that I think is really important is understanding whether you're in person or you're remote, communication is key and it can fail in both environments if
Hmm.
people just aren't open and everything.
Hmm.
I would imagine that the beginning of from that onboarding process into that initial spin up and training has a lot of different challenges now in this more remote world to make sure everyone's on board. How are y'all tackling that to make sure your workflows are in place and people understand them?
So one thing I do between recruiting a team and spinning up, especially on day one of a project, I completely clear my calendar because there are so many things that can go wrong and you're not there in person and be hands-on. So Denika and I both spend a lot of time on the phone, emailing back and forth. Denika and I talk on Slack constantly, just making sure that we're both on the same page, that, hey, this reviewer is emailing me. Have you talked to them? Just making sure that we've got all hands on deck and can get everybody where they need to be. We spend a lot of time talking to IT to make sure that emails are set up properly, their accounts are set up properly. Danica spends a lot of time talking to HR. So it's just constant communication, like we were talking before, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Yeah, so it's just constant communication.
Yeah, for me, the onboarding piece is a huge collaboration effort with HR. We have worked and customized, workflows in order to make it easier. But even when a project starts and it's kicked off, the reviewers still have a lot of questions that are HR related in terms of pay, in terms of, tax withholdings, all of that information. If their address needs to be updated, where we're mailing the check to, there are things that just happen that you have to, like Nicole said, have your entire day cleared. And even after the project starts, there are going to be things that come up that you have to work with IT and HR in order to get resolved.
Excellent. Another thing y'all had talked about, you kind of touched on, was employee retention, learning about employees, and obviously, like you said, you want to work with people you know. So the key is to finding and recognizing those people. How are y'all now navigating that in this remote world so that you can build those relationships and find those great reviewers?
It requires a lot of extra effort on my part and the part of our project managers to go in and take a look at their work product. So it's constantly QCing their work. We have to check. One of the things that people often don't think about is even checking the time that they spend within relativity against the time that they build. That's a big thing too, to make sure that they're actually working the amount of hours that they're staying. When you're in the office, it's easy to see when people come in and when they leave, or there'll be times that people fall asleep at their desk and you can see when that's happening. Remotely, you have to rely on statistics and pulling numbers from the platform. So we spend a lot of time checking people's work, checking to see how engaged they are on calls with counsel, how engaged they are with us. So it's a little extra work to make sure that you're able to properly evaluate the work that they're doing. And then once the case ends, we communicate to that to Denika, or even as a case is going on. There have been instances where we've had to actually release somebody in the middle of a project based on their work product, based on the time that they billed that didn't match up to what they were actually doing, what the time they spent in relativity. So I communicate that with Denika. We make notes of it so that we know who we want to bring back and who we don't want to bring back, and we store that within um, our platform to make sure that we have notes on all the reviewers, and so we can be consistently aware of who's working well and who's not working so well.
So can you
And
just
the
talk a
great
little bit more about the project management software that or that the project managers are reviewing to ensure that the work is being done correctly and on time?
Most of our cases are done within relativity. And ISP hosts relativity, but we also work in other instances of relativity that are hosted by our clients. So it's within that platform that we're taking a look at their work. We go in to take a look at the documents and see how they've coded it, compare it with the instructions that we've gotten from counsel or the feedback that we've gotten from counsel, and we'll make changes on the document there. And we also give them feedback within relativity. So like we're talking about communicating and how important that is, we make sure the reviewers know and understand this wasn't coded quite right. This is how it should be coded. And so then we'll go back and check their work again to make sure they're doing it right. And if they're doing it well, we tell them that as well. So it's not just when people aren't doing well. We make sure they know that they're doing a great job and they should continue doing a great job. The other platform I mentioned was Bullhorn, which is a lot of where Denika operates. So I'll let her talk more about Bullhorn, but we do go into Bullhorn to check their time. That's where we record any feedback that we have on the reviewers as well. And that's where we keep it so that Denika and her team of recruiters and any of the operations admin specialists can access it there, as well as the PM. So everybody has access to everything within Bullhorn.
And Bullhorn is simply a database that houses all of the candidates' resumes, their profile, the information. We can customize it to add any information that we need for a particular candidate, as well as create jobs for each project that we have. I love that it has the ability to let me know who's worked on certain projects, when did it start, when did it end, were the bill rates and the pay rates for that particular project. Now that we have expanded to use the back office, we're able to, like Nicole mentioned, keep the timekeeping and the time entries there for each of the reviewers. So it's a great platform. It allows me to send mass emails as well as mass text messages, and it allows me to communicate with groups in large numbers of reviewers in a matter of seconds. And that's how I execute and send out outreach for each project. So it's a wonderful platform.
Excellent. Y'all talked a lot about collaboration, and obviously that's really key. And having an organization that has those channels open to be able to easily collaborate with IT and HR are really important. But can you also talk about how the collaboration between the different service offerings that IST provides? So we're not just a managed review company, but we're a digital forensic company. We're a court reporting company. We're an e-discovery processing company. How you collaborate in those different groups and areas to better serve your clients?
So I love it, quite honestly, that we do forensics and processing and hosting, and then we can do the court reporting and managed review. So it's end to end for any case that anybody in litigation, and not just for litigation, for any regulatory investigations, anything that really that you've got going on. So we work well with Andy Jacobs, like you mentioned, digital forensics, and then with Azure and the hosting and processing. So when a case comes in, the salesperson will bring us all in from the beginning. And so there's constant communication from start to finish. So that I know that, okay, hey, we're collecting the data now. It's going to be a couple of weeks. And so then I can talk to Denika and say, we've got something coming in. They're still pulling the data. So it's not imminent. We won't know what it's going to be. And so then once they've collected everything, then I can talk to Azure or to the relativity PM, the e-discovery PM, to figure out where they are in the process of processing the data so we know how many documents. Because until we know how many documents there are, we can't really put a team together. So it's important for me to be able to track it from start to finish so that once it's time for managed review to step in to work with them, we're ready. We've already been given a heads up. So we're not, kind of starting behind. We're able to prepare from the beginning and know what's happening.
Excellent. Obviously, part of every project is cost and price and all of that, and that's obviously a really difficult thing. And we all know y'all are on that ops side that sales reps like to oversell, and we want to provide the correct office or services back to them and everything. So how do you provide price transparency in a industry that has so many factors that it can be difficult?
So usually I'm consulting with Denika before. They usually ask me about pricing, but it really comes from the market. So I have to consult with Denika first to see what the market will bear. And I'll let her talk about how we track the market rates and what pay rates are. But that's really how we set our pricing based on what the market is at the time that a case comes in.
And for me, I'm constantly tracking the market rates. I have an entire spreadsheet that I update to keep up with that. But for me as a recruiter, the most important factors that I'm looking at to determine what we need to pay or do in a particular situation is the start date and the duration. Is there overtime? All the things that the reviewer wants to know in order to determine whether or not this is the right project for them or something they would be interested in joining. So, going back to what Nicole says, she's, tracking all this information. She's gauging all of this based on the number of documents, based on deadlines and things of that nature. But that's what I need to know in order to say, okay, we're able to do X, Y, and Z based on this information. So it's not a clear-cut situation where we're just able to say, yes, this will be the pay rate all the time. If it's a short duration, it's not attractive to reviewers. If it's a longer duration, yes, we may be able to get away with paying less. There are a lot of things that we have to take into consideration.
Just out of curiosity, so you talk about this pool and now it's a national pool and everything. So that obviously allows you to go into markets that may have rates that are less than, I mean, I would assume Kansas City rates are less than New York City or Los Angeles just based on the cost of living. I think I might be wrong on that, but I would assume that, but doesn't that also shrink your pool because you're no longer able to get the rates that you need where there's a ton of lawyers in New York and Los Angeles and probably not a lot in Kansas City?
This is a topic that Nicole and I have talked about since the inception of this division. Now that we're remote, there is not different markets because every reviewer can basically apply for every project that is posted. So, a project that's now was in the past based out of New York, they're just not looking for New York attorneys. And same, with Atlanta and California. We have had multiple conversations with reviewers. I have as well. You get what you pay for. And if you want to pay less, the work quality seems to suffer. And the moment that a project is open up that pays $1 or $2 more, you're losing your reviewers. So you're paying for the attrition, you're paying for the quality. And now that it's an open market and everything's remote, every reviewer is applying for every project. So, I think for us, we've seen that the benefit as well as the plus of paying more is that you get quality reviewers as well as you have a higher retention rate because they're not looking for other projects that pay more.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And what this really has done is benefited that reviewer that's not in that New York or Los Angeles market, allowing them to, if they're a quality reviewer, um, to be able to get a higher rate instead of where they were locked in to lower rates and because they're in a tertiary market versus those primary markets. So that, okay, that makes perfect sense. I'd be amiss if I didn't ask about security. Obviously, always one of the main factors of we can't go remote is security. So how do y'all now make those clients feel secure that their documents are safe in this type of environment?
So first, the reviewers have to log in through Citrix, which is a remote desktop. They are not able to download anything to their personal desktops when they are accessing client information or accessing any of our systems. Secondly, all all of the documentation is housed within Relativity, and they cannot access Relativity outside of Citrix because we lock them down based on our Citrix IP address. So they have to be logged into Citrix to log into Relativity to then access any of the documents that are in Relativity. This includes the protocol. This includes any additional documents that the client will send, such as maybe they'll send the request for production. They may send some affidavits over, but all of that is housed within Relativity. They're not able to copy paste. They can't download. They're just, all of the information is locked down. Even if there are some documents, there are times where we have to do redactions. Those documents are downloaded to the Citrix desktop, and then their Citrix desktops are wiped at the end of the project. So we terminate their account access. They can't access their email addresses. They can't access Relativity or any of that information anymore. But we make sure that everything is safe and they cannot print or do any of that. We're worried about them destroying any of the data after. It's all housed virtually and they can't get to it once that case has ended.
Excellent. You hear about keystroke software that's tracking keystroke, or camera software that always has that camera on. Is that something that is just kind of rumor or myth or whatever, or something that's utilized? How is that type of security used?
It's real. We don't use it. I'm not a fan of it at all. These are licensed attorneys and there are ethical obligations that they have to the bar that they're licensed with. So if anything ever happens, you can report them to the bar, and that could be reason for them to be disbarred, which means that affects their livelihood. Um, I prefer to treat people as professionals, and not that they are not, but it feels more like a babysitting software when you have the keystroke or the camera, that kind of thing. So we've set it up with this type of security, and we haven't had any issues. If there were issues or there were consistently problems with people's time, then I may be an advocate of that kind of software, but we have not had any issues. And because they do report or their ethical obligations to the bar, we haven't seen a need to utilize any of that software.
Well, we talked about earlier the importance of creating strong relationships and keeping people on. And absolutely, if they feel like they're babysat, if they feel like that this is a prison where I'm working, not and you're taking away the benefits of working from home by adding that type of security levels, you're going to lose those people. So
That's
it's
right.
really key finding that correct balance and
Hmm.
security to make that client feel comfortable, but to not make the reviewer feel like it's a detriment to their work life balance and everything.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I've heard from reviewers where there have been other companies, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when people went remote, they were utilizing that and no one wanted to work for those companies. So I don't even think that it's being utilized as much as it was at the beginning, because there was some backlash from the reviewers on being treated that way. They felt that they were being treated unfairly. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I just have one last question, but before I ask that, is there anything else we didn't touch on that we missed that you think is important for potential clients to know and understand about remote work?
I'd just say that remote work, whether it's for contract attorneys, it has been proven to be effective across all industries, including for managed review. I know people were very skeptical of it, but we have seen over the last 2.5 years now that it works effectively, and in some cases, even better. There hasn't been a downward turn in reviewers' productivity. There hasn't been a downward turn in the quality of the review. And so remote work actually, and I think it can be even more beneficial than in person or in office work in this industry.
Yeah, I think the key to all remote work, no matter what the industry is just the individual.
Mhm.
Some people thrive in it and some people don't. And it's recognizing and finding the people that thrive in it, and they're going to do, like you said, far more work in that
Right.
remote environment than they ever would have in an in-person
Hmm.
environment. And
Yeah.
some people just need to be in an in-person environment to do better. I know I personally am. While I'm remote today, I tend to be in the office more often because I just work better inside that environment.
Hmm.
But that's just me personally, not for everybody. So
Hmm.
sometimes it's hard to remove the biases of how you work and understand that other people work differently. And I think that's one of the great things that's happened the last couple of years is everyone learning that, hey, just because I need to be in person doesn't mean everyone needs to be in person.
Right. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Well, my last question is obviously we've seen insane changes in the last 3 years in managed review. So, how do you think in the next 3 to 5 years, what are the next big changes we're going to start to see and need to be prepared for?
I think one of the biggest changes, one of the things that we're preparing for is the type of work that we see. Before it was just strictly like a linear review. You get some documents, you review every single document, whether it's a million documents or not. And now we've seen where you can cull the data down, so they're not as many documents. And that's going to continue to where it's going to become a specialized review. Like now we'll sometimes just get privilege reviews, or you see people doing things more along defo prep. So it will become less, I hate to call it this, but rote work, because it can become monotonous doing document review, and it'll become more specialized where people are actually doing um, more involved work, more tailored work, more searching, more assisting with depositions and that kind of thing. So I think that's the wave of the future. I also think that remote work is here to stay. And that's going to be something that we do. It may be more hybrid, but I don't foresee us, even for this more specialized work, going back into the office full time, just because we've seen how efficient it can be. So it'll be a combination of hybrid work and then more specialized work going forward when we talk about managed review.
So a lot of it in that is just learning to embrace the new technologies that are coming
Hmm.
out there, the new AIs, the new searching technology,
Hmm.
and allowing those reviewers to be more of a surgeon so they can really find that exact thing instead of just a
Right.
lot of stuff and then passing that on to someone else to more manually try to be a surgeon. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct. That's where
Awesome.
I see it going. Hmm.
Awesome. And how about you, Danica? Where do you see it going?
I agree with Nicole wholeheartedly. I've talked repeatedly about that remote work is here to stay. I don't see us going back into the office. Maybe there's a hybrid method or a hybrid situation, but for the most part, reviewers have resoundingly said that they prefer working remotely. There's no commute time. There's no, time to have to get dressed, especially now that, it's the summertime and kids are at home. It's allowed them to spend more time with their families. It's just a better quality of life that I think that reviewers are not interested in going back to in-person on-site reviews. And I think, like Nicole mentioned, is technology. The technology will improve. There will be less of a need to have, teams of 100 people to review documents. It's going to be more specialized and just more focused on the review side as well. So those are the two main things that I would say. And it's been a win-win for the clients as well as companies in terms of having remote reviews.
Well, yeah, it's a shame the events had to happen to create this shift, but it's definitely a shift that has been a positive, like y'all said, for the reviewer and for the client. And that's what's amazing. And I want to thank y'all both for coming on today, taking half an hour out of your life to kind of help educate us on this shift and how it's changed and everything. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us, Brad.
Thank you. Once again, I want to thank Nicole Fryson and Denika Thomas for joining us today to talk about how managed review is thriving as a remote service offering. As always, to learn more, visit IST Management's website at istmanagement.com. And to stay abreast of the latest happenings in integrated facilities management and litigation support, please subscribe to the podcast.